Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at MS Dynamics World. On this episode, we are talking business-critical documents and Dynamics 365. Document management is an essential element of any enterprise solution, and my guest on this episode, Roger Cruz of ERP Mechanics, has worked with document management systems for many years with a particular focus on Lasernet. ERP Mechanics is the sponsor of this episode, and Roger tells us about his years of experience deploying document management solutions. He shares some of the typical approaches businesses have used and what he has seen to be most effective. We also discuss some of the out-of-the-box and unique use cases Roger's encountered and how document management systems have evolved over time. And Roger shares some of the ways he sees Lasernet differentiating itself from other solutions available to Dynamics 365 customers today. All right, well, I am here with Roger Cruz of ERP Mechanics. Roger, welcome to the podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. My name is Roger Cruz. I started my career, I'd say late 90s as a software developer in manufacturing. I did things like crystal reports. I wrote reports in text like Visual Basic, JavaScript, just, generic reports. One thing being a developer in manufacturing taught me was workflow, right? You have a beginning and a definite end, and all the magic is in the middle. And that's definitely related to DMS, as I've learned. It's helped me be successful with DMS. Early 2000s, I was one of the casualties of the tech layoffs. So I kind of fell into DMS, fell into a company that did DMS for Oracle mainly. Then the product called Lasernet came to the United States. So we were the first company to work with Lasernet. And that was roughly 2003, 2004, which makes me the longest tenured Lasernet consultant in the U.S.
Oh, wow. Okay. I feel like I'm with royalty here. That's great.
That's what I try to tell my wife, but I'll go for that.
Yeah, it doesn't always work, but.
No, yeah.
Great. So, this is exciting for me because I'm a big fan of the value of document management solutions in general. I've had some great conversations about Lasernet in the past on this podcast and elsewhere. And so I'm really interested to get your perspective. It sounds like actually that just on a personal note that we maybe began in sort of a similar type of situation. I also began writing, doing software development, writing reports in different packages and doing VB development for different kinds of businesses and different industries and, obviously going our own directions. But I saw that, some COM development that you had mentioned in your past, and I did some of that too back in the day. So I think I sort of know generally where you're coming from in those ways.
Yeah, and it's funny early on, right? I didn't know how to use the tools. The tools were kind of rudimentary, so I had to write comms and executables to do what I needed to do. Merge that or have them called from the DMS systems I was using until they actually got better. And they started building functions in that were usable, and I didn't have to do it outside the software anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting point. Yeah. And they sort of caught up to what your needs were in a way.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. Great. So like you said, a long running history with Lasernet. And maybe can you give a little perspective over these years that you've been working with it, like common ways that you've seen organizations kind of approach their document management needs and maybe some ways that if you could generalize, that they've done a good job or perhaps not as good of a job in terms of kind of building their own understanding?
Yeah, well, initially, in the early 2000s, DMS was like low priority, right? It was kind of like last minute and people saw it as a necessary evil. I'd say there was a lack of respect for it. Nowadays, or as time has gone by, people see the importance of it, right? Because your documentation really is an extension of your company. So, now you hear comments like, hey, that can't go out looking like that. Companies are starting to put importance of it. The way their documents look, they have to be consistent. You don't want one document looking different from the next. Everything looks like or should look like it came from the same person or more importantly, the same company. Specifically with like Lasernet, because it's so robust and so customizable, nowadays companies are seeing the power and the value of it. I had one customer I was talking to recently where he said, when we bought Lasernet, all we thought of it was printing documents. But the things I've showed them, the things I was able to do, they're like, it is more than just a DMS. And they've got the better of the bargain when they purchase this tool.
Yeah, it's interesting the way you described that. I was recently having another on another podcast episode, the idea of sort of incrementally improving automation and removing friction kind of came up. And it really sounds like the conversation was not about document management, but that concept really seems to also be very relevant here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not just DMS, but everywhere, right? Everything's like related.
So you touched on this, but when you are talking to clients or prospective clients who are thinking about investing in DMS, how do you explain the value?
Well, the way I explain it is, yes, you're purchasing a document management system. Yes, it can create you forms, could create them easily, but it's more than that, right? So I don't have to, but I do explain how they can utilize the tool for more than just F&O, more than just D365. Right. And I know this is more geared towards D365, but Lasernet as a tool, it's agnostic. You can use it with anything. I've used it with Oracle. I've used it with homegrown systems. One value is while a customer is implementing D365, they can still utilize Lasernet to talk to their existing system. And when I mention that, some customers are like, oh my God, really? Can you show me how? And that's where I love getting into those conversations. Because on the surface, people see it as, yeah, you can create documents. But what they don't see is all it is data, right? If you can give us the data, whatever the inputs and the outputs are, we can do almost anything. In fact, I don't recall anything that we haven't been able to accomplish with Lasernet. It's such a robust tool. I can give you like plenty of examples, like things that Lasernet has done that was not even considered when they purchased the tool, right? So one is customer had come to me and said, you know what, in our old system, in our Oracle system, we used to send a copy of the PDF plus a metadata file to these two companies. And, how can you do that with Lasernet or in F&O? And I said, well, F&O, I don't know how to do it. Within Lasernet, I can, if you give me the specs, I can create the same metadata file. We're already generating the PDF. I just need to know how do I have to send it or what method does the recipient need to receive it. When he gave me those specs, I had a full example, right? A small proof of concept working. And when he said, oh my gosh, I didn't even think a documentation tool could do something like that. And I was like, well, it's not just a documentation tool. And I think that's where things go wrong in the selling point. It's sold as a documentation tool, but it is so much more. And on top of that, the money they saved. When I had completed the work, he said, do you know how much I was quoted to do exactly what you just did with Lasernet? And I said, how much? He said, over $100,000. I said, oh my God, really? I said, that's crazy. And I think we spent less than a week on doing the proof of concept.
Yeah. And if I understand you correctly, this was being basically added on top of whatever other document management capabilities they were already taking advantage of, or maybe had expected to, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the different things you can do with Lasernet. I did a product catalog for a customer. Very basic, right? Here's a list of products out of F&O. We want to show these pictures. We want to show like color swatches, whatnot. Very basic. Every product was the same, beginning to end. They were happy with it. They deployed it and they still use it today. They had another company, that they purchased, and they sold products to the public and they wanted the same catalog. And when I realized it's for the public and it's for their products that they're selling, I said, why do you want that catalog? I said, can you show me what you have now? The catalog they showed me was beautiful, right? They have different wireframes. So every class of product had a look and feel or a theme. And they had like 5 different wireframes. And I said, why would you want that first catalog when, you have such a beautiful catalog now? And they're like, well, it's tough to maintain. They're not in D365. They actually maintain their products in an Excel spreadsheet. And I said, okay, well, if I could make your catalog look similar to what you have now, would you prefer that? And they said, yes. I was able to achieve that through Lasernet. The inputs and outputs are all SharePoint. And like I said, the products are managed in Excel. So not even D365 related, but we were able to generate a product catalog that was dynamic, meaning if they make a change in the Excel spreadsheet, Lasernet knows to like change up the wireframe, for example, or change the theme of what the page should look like based on the product class.
So in a case like that, it might not be like the perfect approach from sort of an IT perspective, but you're working with what they have and you're still bringing more automation to it, working with them where they're at.
Yeah, most definitely. They were happy because the people who ran the catalogs, they were more familiar with Excel.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I did what was best for the company at the time. Now, if they were to put everything into F&O, there's no doubt I could recreate what I did for them with Excel.
Yeah, and presumably some of it would be reusable, some of it would be, new effort, but it's much more standardized that way, right, than it would have been. And just, I guess, those are great stories, and thank you for sharing them. I know that you also, have a project management perspective, right, on the kind of work you do. Can you talk about how that sort of reflects on like document management and implementing document management in the context of a project that maybe is ERP focused?
Yeah, sure. So I used to go on site a lot. I'd say probably 75% of the time I would perform work on site. And in 2018, I'd say, customer asked me, they're like, how long have you been a project manager? I said, I'm not. And he said, but yes, you are. And he started describing the things I was doing, the way I was talking to people, the way I was gathering requirements, setting timelines, setting milestones, meeting the milestones. And, just basically the life of a project. He recommended I take certain courses, look into getting your PMP. I checked with my manager. I qualified a number of hours of projects that I managed. I took the test. I passed it. I earned my PMP in 2019. And since then, together with my development background, right? Because I mentioned workflow in manufacturing. It's all the same. I see everything as a workflow, whether it's project management or development or DMS. There's a start and there's an end, right? And all the magic is done in the middle. And it's how do we achieve that, right? We want to make sure that everybody is informed. When it comes to DMS, right? If someone presses the button, they want to make sure that what they intend to send out, whether email, fax, print, whatever, is actually sent, right? So when I look at these projects, I have to make sure everything from A to Z is covered, right? I try to make sure, and this is probably the developer mind in me, is make sure there's error correction, what ifs, right? So I think about the scenarios, what ifs, how do we handle that if that happens, right? So I'd say my whole career path, whether it's development or PMing or DMing or a document management system, it's all related. To me, it's a big workflow.
Well, let me also ask you more specifically about Lasernet in the context of D365. How do you explain what makes the Lasernet, unique compared to other DMSs?
I think the one thing that stands out, is they have a connector with D365, right? So earlier I mentioned you could use Lasernet with anything, with any ERP system, Oracle, homegrown, whatever. The beauty of D365 and Lasernet is that we have what FormPipe has what's called the Lasernet connector. So when you print something in D365, it goes through Lasernet and comes back to your D365 screen. You don't have to leave to open up a directory and open up a PDF. It's shown to you on the screen. So it's like most customers don't even realize there's an outside server, sitting somewhere doing all this processing.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to add for our listeners before we wrap up here?
Yeah. Another thing about Lasernet, and I could talk about it. There's so much I can talk about Lasernet, right? But another thing that's an advantage over other tools, they have a graphical workflow. So you can actually see where does the data come in. You can see the type of inputs, right? Is it coming in through Azure Service Bus? Is it coming through a file? You can see that, and you can trace, because it is a workflow diagram, you can trace where that data is going and knowing what's happening to it at every single point before it goes to the destination. Lasernet is such a great tool, and FormPipe has done a great job of constantly improving the tool. I'm not sure if you're aware, but they are coming out with a free version. It's called Lasernet Embedded, where users can try Lasernet for free. You can take advantage of 3 forms just out of the box. You can actually use what's called the Query Wizard to add tables and fields. It extends the SSRS, where you can take your SSRS and extend it by joining a table to it and fields. So yeah, and this is called Lasernet Essentials. Lasernet Essentials allows users to try it for free, and they can see the power of Lasernet by adding, extending their SSRS reports and using the Lasernet developer tool to generate like a nice looking document that can be sent out to customers.
Yeah, I think I've talked about this on an earlier podcast because I think this has been, I know it's still quite new, but I think it's been planned for a little while, right? And one of the advantages, as you mentioned, as I understood it, was that, yeah, you're working on it directly kind of within the ERP interface. Is that right?
Exactly. It's all embedded within the ERP interface.
Yeah.
Now, they're going to have 3 different versions, right? So there's Essentials, which is limited to 3 reports. Professional, which is unlimited reports, but you can still do the same thing, right? Use the connector tool to extend the SSRS. And then they have Enterprise, which is Lasernet as we know it today, that sits on its own server. Now, Enterprise is going to be the most robust, right? Because you have that workflow that you can modify and customize to your needs. But Essentials and Professional, it's all embedded within D365.
Okay. Interesting. Well, it certainly gives a new option for D365 customers, and I'm interested to see how that progresses alongside all the other sort of Lasernet technology that's out there. Roger, thanks so much for being here. It's been great to get a chance to chat with you. Great to hear you're with the ERP Mechanics team. And thanks again for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Roger for joining us. And this message from ERP Mechanics. Whether it's a new or existing project, ERP Mechanics is here to minimize risk, reduce costs, and deliver your project on time. They offer a free consultation and trial of their services. Learn more about how they can help at www.erpmechanics.com. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jason@msdynamicsworld.com. For all of our updates, please do follow us on LinkedIn. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.